Welcome back. So I'm still reading about Duke Ellington, but this time from a different book by a different author. This one is entitled Duke Ellington's America, and it's by Harvey G. Cohen. I'll have the title of the book in the description bar. And the topic is how childhood experiences and geography informs or shapes our form of blackness. Jumping in. Ellington's parents, James and Daisy, strictly maintained that all people were equal and no race better than another. This marked a characteristic attitude of the black middle class of the turn of the century Washington, D.C. Social and political progress, according to the mindset of this community, would not occur through political agitation and protest, but by high achievement and radiating a sense of respectability. If you've listened to the Booker T. Washington video, then you'd know the respectability politics originated with him. And I do not concur with it. Of course, I respect him for trying something, and you can only do what you know until you know better. The problem with respectability politics: one, human rights and equal access are birthrights. It's not something; they're not things to be earned. Two, racism, systemic injustice will never be solved through the micro, you just changing your behavior. It has to be you and the society at once. The systems that are oppressive have to be dismantled. Washington's black children were made aware of the violence and discrimination of the Jim Crow era, yet also were taught that skilled achievers would be recognized no matter their color. Ellington's younger sister, Ruth, explained how the Ellington family's social life reflected this sentiment. In our house while I was growing up, people of all colors were there, more whites than coloreds. More whites than coloreds. Stick on that. I won't go in more. My father was like that. Duke didn't talk about color. In our house, you didn't talk about color. I remember when I was about 5 years old in Washington, I was standing down in the front garden with my cousin, and the people passing our house were various colors, and she pointed out to me that these people had different colors. I'd never heard anybody talk about color, so I ran upstairs to my father, with whom I had all my, quote, intellectual conversations, and I thought that I ought to impart this information to him. And he was reading the newspaper, and when I told him what my cousin Elizabeth said, he put the paper down and said 2 words. Nonsense, Ruthie. And he put his newspaper back up. So I went downstairs and I never mentioned color again. Giggles. That's probably why I am the way I am now about color. So maybe the information they had there, they thought they could solve racism by inviting white people into their homes so they could see that they were good people, and being colorblind. First thing, color makes the world so beautiful. Diversity is amazing. Why would you want to be blind to it? And again, racism is a systemic injustice, and you must dismantle the system, not pretend that somebody's complexion does not exist. Continuing, the attitude of recognizing the best in each category rather than categorizing people and accomplishments by color represented the Ellington ethos. Stopping. The reason we have to categorize black people's achievements is the mantra of white supremacy, saying that we're inferior. So each time we have to point out, or some people choose to point out, that we're doing what you're saying we can't do, and we're excelling at it. Continuing, after flirtations with sports and art, the teenage Ellington gravitated toward the field of music, which at the time he was born represented one of the few areas in the country in which blacks earned money and respect at the highest level, competing and collaborating with whites at the top of a profession. This was the case because of systemic injustice, of course. Ellington's background and the black cultural figures who preceded him proved essential in his ability to create the most distinguished music in America. Washington, D.C., the Washington, D.C., into which Edward Kennedy Duke Ellington was born, proved a perfect springboard for his genius and ambition. So we saw how his family influenced him, and now we're talking about how the geography influenced him. It was a center of black musical and intellectual resistance to racism, and probably the best place to be an African American at the turn of the century, though certainly not without racial prejudice. The city was a bastion of the black middle class to which Ellington's family tenuously belonged. They were on the fringes. The community's black leaders did not so much fight against racist systems in America as quietly and determinedly circumvented it. So they kept themselves away as best as they could from the issue. The dignity and pride they sought to instill in the Washington black community, especially its young people, avoided challenging and confronting the social and political realities of the time, but instead sought to rise above them. From his upbringing, from the mentors and the cultural figures who came before him, Ellington adopted a method of assertive yet non-confrontational activism in dealing with matters of race, prejudice, and black achievement. Even before the Civil War, Washington represented a better place than usual for black people to live. The writer says black, so I won't do that. Laws against black people were rarely enforced. The majority of black people were free by the 1830s, and the first black public school opened in 1807, followed by many more in the ensuing decades, probably more in relation to population than anywhere else in the United States. After the Civil War, Washington gained a reputation as a center of, quote, respectable Negro society. And you know, when they say respectable, I'm sure they're not talking about black affirming, they're talking about assimilating to whiteness. Serving as a haven from exploitative sharecropping in the South, designed to resemble slavery, most of the worst Jim Crow discrimination and increased incidences of lynching and racial violence. So in reality, the other black people were being still in a form of slavery while they over here in Washington were more thriving. It boasted the largest black urban community in the nation, 31% of its inhabitants. Until the Woodrow Wilson administration ushered in an era of increased segregation in 1913, the federal government treated and hired local blacks with relative equality. Booker T. Washington noted in the late 1870s that African Americans could live a life of ease in the nation's capital, and the argument gained more credence by the time of Ellington's birth. A few black people were born to limited wealth, but most were in small businesses or professions such as teachers, barbers, lawyers, dentists, college-trained clergy, and social workers. For whites, such occupations represented middle-class status, but in the black communities, these were viewed as elite occupations. 3 national African American papers ran society columns reporting on the activities of the elite black Washingtonians, and some black observers criticized them for being overly obsessed with status and material objects, a view Langston Hughes endorsed when he stayed in Washington for a period in the mid-1920s. So you can see why if you think that your liberation, your equality would come from achievement, then of course you're going to be proud and think And remember the starting point that we came here and we started out enslaved. So to go from being enslaved to having any kind of professional position, any kind of success, of course, you were not even invited to the race, and there you are catching up with the people who tried to keep you out of the race. So I understand that. And it's also from respectability politics. They're saying, if I achieve, then I should be accepted. So they're going to promote their achievement, hoping that the white gaze will look upon it and think, now you're worthy. And again, that's why I reject respectability politics. I don't need anyone's gaze to affirm my worthiness. I was born that way. Continuing. Washington's elite black community adopted many of the trappings and beliefs of white American middle class of the 19th century. Quote, respectability, church membership, family stability, home ownership, hard work, good education, and refinement. Stopping here, none of these qualities in and of themselves are to be spoken negatively of, but who defines what respectability is? Church membership is the supremacy of Christianity, like you could be of another religion. Family stability, even during slavery, black people found a way to keep their family stable. A grandmother taking care of you, someone else. We're trying, and not even recognizing the way that the system is meant to destabilize the family. Home ownership. How do you get there when there are laws, redlining laws preventing you from getting loans? Hard work. Black people don't need to work any harder. They've done their time. Good education. Yeah, and refinement. What's refinement? So you see, the values, but you have to get deeper into it. What are they really promoting? The same values were cherished in the Ellington household. Jacqueline Moore traced the development of the black middle class in Washington, D.C., and documented a distinct difference between the philosophies of this group in the 1880s and in the first 2 decades of the 20th century. While the group in both periods placed emphasis on manners, etiquette, and dress, the middle-class blacks of the earlier periods stressed assimilation into white society by cultivating an image of respectability grounded in highbrow culture. Again, I resist this because which of these people were highbrow? Highbrow stealing people's labor, highbrow committing genocide against the indigenous people. What is highbrow? That's some lowbrow stuff. A black opera company was founded in the city in the 1870s, and the Intellectual American Negro Academy developed in 1897. Amid other cultural activities such as a literary organization, often classical music programs, plays, poetry readings, and lecture series for blacks. So you see them internalizing white supremacy and saying to be somebody is to assimilate to white culture. By the turn of the century, however, whites had still not accepted such attempts at bridging the racial divide and generally viewed all blacks as inferior, no matter their level of refinement or the fact that some of them lived in better circumstances than many whites. Black elites increasingly stressed racial solidarity with an emphasis on black culture and a closer identity with the black masses. So yes, they did this natural research and they thought, maybe if I achieved and showed them that I was being a good black person, they would accept me. When they realized they didn't accept them, then they turned right. And that to me is good research. That's not working, we'll try something else. So now the positive black identity is going to come through, right? They steered their children towards careers that would help the black community achieve independence from white society and worked more openly for racial justice and upliftment. Moore found that the black children of Ellington's generation and their middle-class parents in Washington believed that if, no quote, if they worked quietly behind the scenes to contradict negative images of African Americans, they could bring whites to accept them as equal without open conflict. Such a strategy, with its emphasis on subtle challenge instead of head-on attack on the unity of black culture, encapsulated Ellington's view on race relations almost perfectly. So I'm going to stop here because it shows you clearly, like, where you live determines how you're going to approach it, your circumstances. They're living well, safe. So being subtle matches their experience. Something like Harriet, how Harriet can be so subtle and sweet. When you're living in Jim Crow, being lynched, not having food, being treated like a sharecropper, subtle will not get the freedom that you want. So again, your geography, your upbringing, your resources will determine your kind of blackness. It's not a character flaw, how you behave, what makes you classy. It's how do I adapt to a system that is trying to kill me? I do whatever it takes to survive. But please feel free to tell me what you think about the subject. Thanks so much for listening.